morning. My name is Bob Etemad, and welcome to Baha'is Today. I am your host this morning on the Mainline Network, brought to you by the Baha'i community of Radnor. This program will be focusing on initiating conversations on social change and community building. We offer a series of talks and presentations regularly with guests from the Baha'i community who will be sharing with us their experiences on this journey of trying to make the world a better place for all of us. Today, we are fortunate enough to have with us Dr. Soheil Mohajerjasbi, who is a MSAA PhD, retired aeronautical and structural engineer from the Boeing Company. Our topic today is the monthly Uncomfortable Conversation series, which currently is a series of Zoom events that are the initiative of 3 Baha'is from the communities in the suburbs of Philadelphia, including the main line, period. These issues are devoted to the issues of race unity and race relations in the United States, period. Our meetings are devoted and intended to provide learning opportunities from personal stories and experiences of people who have been directly affected. So welcome to Baha'is Today, and welcome Dr. Mohajerjasbi.
Thank you, glad to be here.
We would first like to start perhaps by you telling us a little more about yourself and how long you've been here in this area.
All right, wonderful. Well, I was born and raised in Iran, attended primary and secondary school in Tehran, received my mechanical engineering degree at Pahlavi University in Shiraz, which is a southern city in Iran, studied at the University of Washington and earned a Master's of Science degree in Aeronautical and Astronautics in 1977. Later on, in 1991, I earned a PhD in mechanical engineering at Drexel University. I had worked for the Iranian helicopter industries in Iran, Bell Helicopter in Texas, a small aeronautics research and development firm in California, Beech Aircraft in Kansas, and Boeing Helicopter in Philadelphia. While working at the Boeing Company, I also worked at Drexel University as adjunct faculty and was a consultant to Piasecki Aircraft Company for about 10 years on a new hybrid aircraft they were developing. I retired from the Boeing Company in 2017. And your next question was how I got to this area.
Yes, yes.
Well, I came to Philadelphia in 1985. Well, from 1983 to 1985, my family and I lived in Wichita, Kansas. My wife, who's a physician, had joined a private practice and was reasonably happy, but had a passion to enter pediatrics. So she found that opportunity in Chicago in 1985. I moved and my 5-year-old daughter to Chicago. A couple of months later in 85, my employer in Kansas loaned me to the Boeing Company for 6 months, which was extended for another 6 months. At the end of the second 6 months, Boeing offered me a job and I moved the family from Chicago to Philadelphia in 1986.
Wonderful. So you've been really in this area now for quite a number of years.
Yes.
And so you've seen, so as a member of the Baha'i community of this area, you've seen the Baha'i community evolve and develop. Tell me a little more about your experience. So much of your Baha'i experiences have been out here in the main line. Is that fair to say?
Yes, of course, yes. When I arrived in 1986, we lived in Havertown for a little while. And then since 1991, we've been in Bryn Mawr.
Lovely, lovely. So tell us then a little bit more about this monthly conversation that you are a part of and organizing called Uncomfortable Conversations. What exactly is this?
Okay. Well, to give you a brief history, the Baha'i community on the main line had been holding these monthly meetings at the Luddington Library in Bryn Mawr for the last 5+ years that we call important conversations. Various topics of interest to the community had been taken up, such as unity and diversity, community policing, equality of rights between men and women, etc. Since the beginning of this year and the COVID-19 pandemic, these meetings have been moved to the Zoom platform. Now, as of August 5 of this year, we have started a new conversation series, which we call Uncomfortable Conversations, and are monthly conversations that we conduct on Zoom and are dedicated to the question of race in the country. Well, to give you a background, it's hardly a day goes by without watching on TV images of police encounter with members of the African American community, where majority of these encounters end in violence and sometimes death. So the strange thing is that these things happen every day and in many cities. And the fact that they happen so frequently and we let it happen every day has the appearance, at least, that we have normalized this behavior. And as a society, we seem to look the other way. So when we are asking ourselves why and how we've gotten to the point that we are, we basically have to look at ourselves as well, because this is the culture that we've created. I realized that I did not know much about the history of race in the country and how and why we've gotten to this point. I thought it was because I was obviously raised in a different place and different country. But later on, I learned that even my friends who were born and raised in this country, for the most part, did not know the history. And as it had not been included in their curriculum. So the thought was, there was a need to create a space where we could listen. We could all listen and learn from personal experiences and life stories that have never gotten coverage. And as a first step to establish the necessary friendship and trust to then help explore together what small positive steps we can take in finding a solution to the problem, and then hopefully demand specific action.
So in naming it Uncomfortable Conversations, what part of this would you and the rest of the organizers did you feel was uncomfortable? Why do you use that particular term, uncomfortable?
Well, probably for two reasons. First, let me tell you how this idea started. We may all remember watching beating of Rodney King in Los Angeles in '92 and the subsequent riots and destruction. Then the killing of Trayvon Martin in 2012, killing of Eric Gardner and his refrain of I Can't Breathe in 2014, and many similar events. But it was the horrific 8 minutes and 46-second video of how George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis in 2020, May of 2020, and following protests in the streets and demonstrations of Black Lives Matter movement around the world, that was a moment of reflection for many of us. And also, as of June of 2020, a statement was published by the National Institutions of the Baha'i Faith that provided the impetus for this initiative. Now, why we call it Uncomfortable Conversation? Obviously, it is difficult conversations, and some people, by mistake, maybe call it difficult conversations. But it's uncomfortable conversations because something that I've learned so far is that it takes a lot of courage to trust people to share these personal experiences. It's very uncomfortable for the people that are actually sharing these experiences. What I've learned is that in the African American community, they readily share these experiences among themselves, but when it comes to sharing it with non-Black people, they hesitate because the trust is not there. So obviously it's uncomfortable on the part of the people who do share these life experiences and stories. And obviously on the receiving end, we as listeners and trying to learn from these experiences, I've been made very uncomfortable from the things that I've heard from the last 4 or 5 meetings that we've had. So that was the main reason for calling them uncomfortable conversations.
Understood. So the uncomfortable conversations are issues that address both the person that is offering, let's say, a story or an experience that is difficult maybe to share among a group of people that may not be familiar, as well as introducing people that may not be familiar with these stories with new experiences and new perspectives that they might not have imagined before.
Well, for the most part, I can speak for myself. For the most part, what I have seen occasionally, no, not occasionally, frequently on TV, had been reporting of things that had gone wrong. I have not had the opportunity to hear the very difficult experiences that people in the African American community have experienced growing up, have experiences with the school system, experiences when they try to rent, when they try to buy out. These are experiences that for me, and maybe to a large extent to the remainder, other people, the participants in our meetings, these are largely unknown. We only, learn when 6 o'clock news reports on bad things that somebody did and stuff and got into trouble with law. But so the thought was that by creating this safe place to share these experiences, we all have the opportunity to learn things that we never knew before. And as a first step to establish friendships and hopefully establishing the trust that is necessary to then explore together, black and white, to explore together as the next step forward, how to take a small positive step in solving or helping to solve this problem.
Thank you. Did the Baha'i community in this area, did it feel that this was a particularly unique problem, this issue of uncomfortableness and perhaps the need to address these issues in our particular area, or did you feel that this was something as part of a national dialogue that we need to definitely be participating in, or both?
Obviously, this being a national problem, we started these conversations and as a way of learning or providing a learning opportunity for us, as well as providing an opportunity for people to share their experience. Somebody said that the first time that we had this meeting, somebody said, sounded like a therapy session, which is fine. If it is to some people, it's a therapy session, so be it. Because it takes a lot of courage, as I said, and trust for somebody to open up and tell other people that they hardly know about their life experiences. And this is only done as a first step to hopefully establish friendships that could result in trust and stuff. Now, as far as whether this is a local problem or national, obviously it's a national problem, as I referred to earlier. And our hope is when we're holding these uncomfortable conversations, we're actually encouraging the people, encouraging them to start their own uncomfortable conversations with their own circle of friends, because there's so many untold stories that need to be shared and opportunities to learn from these experiences. And once these uncomfortable conversations, which are long overdue, in my opinion, are holding roots in many communities and places, then as a community or as communities, we can hopefully find steps forward to one at a time solve these problems that we're encountering.
Lovely. So what has the response been locally? How have these meetings gone so far?
Well, of course, this initiative is a young one, and the response of the community in the long term remains to be seen. But one way of judging the community response may be receptivity and the number of participants in these meetings. So far, the response has been very encouraging. The meetings of uncomfortable conversations are held on the first Wednesday of every month. As a matter of fact, when we're doing this recording, this evening at 7 o'clock, we have the sixth meeting of the conversations.
Wonderful.
The fifth meeting was held on December 2nd. There were 76 Zoom screens at the meeting, some occupied by 2 people or more. One feature of these conversations is that these are not lectures or speeches, they are conversations. After the presenter for the night finishes her story, the participants are allowed and even encouraged to take part in the follow-up conversation. Another way of judging community response is the participants' feedback after the meeting. In addition to occasional emails, encouraging emails that we received, following the meeting of December 2nd, some of the participants decided to invite the presenter to schedule an encore presentation at their educational institution. Another request came in for permission to post the recording of the meeting on their YouTube channel. So, as I said, these are the responses we've received so far and have been very encouraging.
Wonderful. Do you find that, so in these discussions that have been had so far, is there a broad representation of both listener and sharer? Do you feel there are many sharers and perhaps less listeners? Are you impressed with the diversity of the people that have attended so far?
Well, very impressed and very encouraged. Actually, these meetings, we suggest for the presenter or the speaker to take about 30, the meetings are actually 1 hour and a half. So we suggest the speaker to take 35 minutes to share the story, and then it's opened up for the conversation, obviously questions and answer and conversation, and the idea is we suggest to have a conversation on finding positive steps, what we can take steps as individuals and as communities, steps forward to hopefully find a solution for this.
Do you find that the discussions, do they revolve around religious principles, social principles? Do they revolve around healing of perhaps language and issues related to how people talk to one another? Do you have a sense that when there are people that have stories to share, have they felt misunderstood? Have they felt unheard? What are the issues? And then on the other side, people that perhaps are listening, what insights perhaps have they gleaned from the hearing? Do you have any preliminary ideas?
Well, as you earlier mentioned, this is an initiative of the Baha'i community on the main line. But we definitely, suggest to the speakers, whether we invite the Baha'i speakers or people from other communities, not to use this platform as preaching or teaching their principles. But of course, when the short stories are shared, when people are participating in the conversation, their views are informed by their religious or tradition or background. So if the Baha'is are suggesting ways and stuff, it is obviously informed by their the teachings of the Baha'i faith. And of course, there are many people from the church communities on the mainland that are invited. And obviously, when they are making their suggestions or their comments, is informed based on their previous background. So far, it's as I said, this is a young initiative, and long-term response of the community remains to be seen. But for now, it's been very encouraging.
Can you share with us, just for listeners that might not be familiar, what are some of the teachings that the Baha'i faith offers that addresses this issue of racial disharmony or racial amity? Are there unique aspects that you feel the Baha'i community addresses in this area?
Well, I can share you with this. Of course, I don't know how how much our viewers are familiar with the teachings of the Baha'i faith, but the central teachings of the Baha'i faith is basically the oneness of humanity. And there are other principles or teachings of the Baha'i faith that revolve around elimination of prejudice of all kinds. In addition to these, there's strong emphasis on justice. Let me quote one from the writings of the Baha'i faith. This is what the Baha'is refer to as hidden words, and it's from the founder of the Baha'i faith as to the emphasis on justice. He says, "O son of spirit, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Tear not away therefrom if thou desirest me, and neglect it not, that I may confide in thee. By its aid thou shalt see with thine own eyes, and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge, and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. Ponder this in thy heart, how it behooveth thee to be. Verily, justice is my gift to thee, and the sign of my loving kindness. Set it then before thine eyes." So as far as this question of the racial tensions, I think the principle of elimination of prejudice is at the core of it, which is a principal teaching of the Baha'i faith. And then second is emphasis on the question of justice, that we all are creation of the same creator, and we all have a part to play in making contribution to betterment of the society. And the emphasis on justice, that if one member of the society is disadvantaged, it affects everyone. I think at some level we all know that these biases and prejudices stop us from being a full human being and making our full contribution. So even we may not be on the receiving end of the prejudice or these racial tensions, just even as a white person, we are affected by these biases and prejudices.
So as you look forward, have you seen how this initiative may have identified further goals or plans? You mentioned things earlier, perhaps of initiating action, but wondering if anything else came up to you as, and the others to address this issue of I'll say racial, I'm going to say uncomfortable conversations in general. That, and it sounds as if we're focusing on the issue of racial prejudices and or racial disharmony. Have you found that this initiative has identified future goals for action?
Well, it's obvious this is a problem that had been in the making for the maybe 400 years. And it's obvious that it will not find a quick solution. It's clear that the correcting this problem is not the work of a single generation. However, the intensity of this task should not discourage and prevent us from taking action today. Basically, as I said before, we encourage the participants in our conversations to start their own conversations, their own uncomfortable conversations with their circle of friends and associates. And the hope is that these conversations are the first step in establishing lasting relationships and sincere friendships that hopefully will result in bonds of trust and love that will help us in building a new pattern of community life. These activities and the genuine friendship that we hope that comes out of these conversations will help to weaken and eventually uproot prejudice-tainted notions underlying our present social order and can begin to undo racism in our society, we think.
Very interesting.
Another thing I'd like to mention is that past and more recent history teaches us that political activism by itself may not provide lasting solution to this problem. Protests and demonstrations are effective tools to focus the attention on the problem, but to solve it requires more. It takes more than political power to solve this problem. I'd like to share with you a quote from Universal House of Justice, the International Governing Council of the Baha'i Faith, that address this point. They say, yet no matter how high-minded a particular cause might be, if it is advanced through contention and confrontation, it merely provokes and intensifies the flame of a counter-movement initiated by others who act on what they consider to be their own high-minded beliefs. Real solutions remain elusive. The cycle of contention continues without end, with one group after the other seizing power, enough power to implement its views before becoming overcome by those in opposition. One need only look to the endless mutations of racist oppression over hundreds of years, adapting so as to undermine every social advance in that area. And as final words, I'd like to bring this as the consequence of inaction in this area. I would like to remind us of the remarks by Abdul Baha, who's one of the three central figures of the Baha'i faith, that unhesitatingly warned of dire consequences to American society and to the cause of world peace if her peoples failed to live up to the truth of the oneness of humanity, especially in the relation between black and white.
So if even political high-mindedness is going to be perhaps insufficient, as suggested by what you've shared, what are you suggesting is the missing piece? You often refer to the issue of friendships and people getting to know one another. It almost sounds as if you're suggesting that some deeper personal or emotional change in the heart is perhaps what you might be suggesting. I wondered if you could elaborate. What is it that might be needed that might lead to a more lasting, you suggest might lead to a more lasting solution to this issue?
Well, as I think I stated earlier, that many of the problems existing worldwide, not only in this country today, have spiritual roots, spiritual problems of racism, materialism, many of these social problems that we have. And if these are really spiritual problems, is there any question that the solution should be spiritual as well? So the point that I want to make is that we are hoping these conversations will result in friendships, love, and actually re-examining the assumptions or unlearning many of the things that we've learned in the past because of ignorance, because of many other reasons, and rethink those assumptions. And hopefully, because of that friendship, that trust could be developed and cultivated. And from there, we can together explore how we tackle this problem of race.
Dr. Mohajerjasbi, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing with us these insights. I think it's always good to know that that there are activities going on in our region, sometimes not as obvious, that are helping to address some of the issues we hear about all over the country. And knowing that there are people who are interested in addressing them here in our own area is very comforting. So we appreciate. Yes, please.
One thing I'd like to add, and that is, if our viewers would like to get invitation to these meetings, which are on the first Wednesday of every month, starting at 7 p.m. till 8:30, the email for conversations is uncomfortableconversation and then number 6.gmail@gmail.com. Then they would receive their own invitation regularly. They would go on the email list and they will learn about our program.
Perfect. And so that's all for today. If there's any information, additional information you wish, you can visit our website at www.mainlinebaha'is.org. That's BAHAIS.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you.